So today I'm going to talk about a few things, and it kind of stems around approval and maturity. Let me see. And when Pastor was talking about how he wants people, or he wants us to have a testimony that's kind of raw and real so that people can connect with that. I feel that because that's how I felt like when I've been preaching. I felt like I wanted to just be real about my mistakes and even successes, and so people can learn, because I feel like a lot of people have the same thoughts. Like, all humans are the same, even when you travel to other countries. It's like they say, like, same people, different clothes. I don't know if you ever heard that, but it's very true. They might have different cultures, they might eat different food, but the core of the human being is the same no matter where you go. And they might have like different character traits here and there, but the core is the same. And I feel like most people are afraid to talk about, obviously there's context, but I feel like a lot of people are afraid to talk about stuff that is embarrassing or stuff that might make them look bad about their past or those kind of things. But I think it's important, because it's like for music, if we're not willing to talk about the things that people don't want to talk about, then how is it going to connect with anybody, And I think the same thing applies with preaching and with testimonies and with people's lives. Everybody goes through a certain thing. Like, you can think of it like even spiritually. Everybody has different traumas that they've been through in life, but the core of it is the same. They're hurt and they need healing, right? And different people can connect to different people. Different broken people can connect to different broken people. So, I think one thing that I want to share that I know everybody thinks about, but it's kind of a taboo to talk about, because taboo is like, it's like, oh, maybe we shouldn't kind of thing. But I think it's important that we talk about it, because I know a lot of people think about it. And I'll just give you my story. So when I told you guys I got my discipline back in, not this February, but the one before, and God was coming after me for some certain things. And what ultimately came out of that was a few things, but one of them that was really important was, how was my relationship with God, truly? Because, we could start out really well, and think about it this way. If, let's say I came here in, 2015, 2016, and Pastor took me under his wing, and he helped me, right? So in the beginning, it could look like I'm doing really well, but we have to also remember that that's because we have a helping hand, right? It's like when Rachel first started walking, if I hold her hand, she can do it. But if I let go, then she wasn't able to. But then over time, now she can walk by herself, right? So it can look like you get a jump start, but maybe it's because your hand is being held, right? And so the journey goes on. I feel like I'm doing really well, and a lot of good things are happening. God's really blessing me. I got a good job at Zoom, and he blessed me financially there. He gave me a great wife, right? So God's really blessing me. And then the time comes where I get that word where God's like, I want you to start coming to me now. And that was right around the time we got disciplined. And I it was hard to understand that, because I was thinking like, but I am coming to you, right? That's my thought. It's like, right, if I have something that I need to fix, if there's something that I need to do, I have a question about, I'll go to my authority, which is representing God, and that's coming to you, God, right? But it was a different level now where God was like, no, you need to come to me directly because you need to grow up now. And it was a little polarizing for me because I was so used to having my hand held, and being told the right decisions to make, right? It's easy to be successful when you have somebody telling you the right choices to make. But when you're kind of by yourself, it's a little more nerve-wracking, right? It's like if you're in school and they're telling you all the things to do, but then you go out, like if you're a trader and you go to, let's say you go to a trading school and they teach you how to, the teacher's like, do this, sell this one, do this one. Of course, it's going to be easier to make money, but when you're out on your own, no one's there, and it's between you and God, it's a little more scary. And I think what it revealed in my heart was my trust in God was lacking, right? And we have to constantly examine our inner being. And like Pastor says, he's here to spiritually grow us up so we can turn to God. We can't be, like the Bible says, we can't be feeding on the milk, right? We have to turn to meat. We have to turn to solid foods. We have to start eating by ourselves, right? We have to start using the fork, the spoon, the utensils, heat it up in the microwave. We got to do it ourselves. We can't be fed forever. And so when that happened, and Pastor will tell you, there was a conversation we had, and I told him, I was like, why are you pushing me to the side, I was like, why? I feel like I'm on an island. I feel like I'm being like abandoned, And he basically told me like it was my time to grow up now. Like I had that time where God helped me grow through them, and now God basically pushed me off the cliff and was like the birds, and they're like, okay, go fly now, and you're like falling in the air, like, how do I use my wings, And it's like, it's very nerve-wracking because the wind's hitting you, and then you're like, you have these wings that are there, but you don't know how to use them. And so there was that fear, and I realized that I didn't have a strong foundation or trust in God. I had the beginning of it, but it needed to grow deeper. And I'm grateful for this season that I went through, because now I feel that my trust in God has grown deeper, and my relationship with God outside of pastors is growing stronger, And I know everybody thinks that, and I don't think you guys should be embarrassed. I think if you have questions, you guys have to be open about it, because when you hide, it's when problems start to bubble up by themselves. It's better that you open the door instead of filling it and then opening the closet and all the toys fall out, right? It's better to just clean it up first. Keep the closet organized. Put stuff where it needs to be. There's an issue, get it out and clean it. Don't just keep stuffing it in there or hiding it, and then the time comes where the door, it can't hold it anymore. It just burst open, and now you have 25 problems instead of just one, right? That's a really key thing that you guys got to learn, is just do it. It's like I was just reading the verse. Let's go to Matthew 6. But the main part of that is just zoom in the top right to like 250. And then go all the way down. That's kind of later, but I didn't think I was going to talk about this part, like all the way to the bottom. All right. Yeah, right here. So above all, constantly seek God's kingdom and his righteousness. Well, we know this, seek the kingdom first. 34, refuse to worry about tomorrow, but deal with each challenge that comes your way, one day at a time. And if you just hover over the little footnote comment box next to time, it says, one day's trouble is enough for one day. And then the verse after says, tomorrow will take care of itself. And I used to read this a lot when I was working at Zoom, because it just helped me just get one day at a time. And I felt like it was almost as if like I was talking to Jesus, and he's like, just the next day, and then the next day, and then all that time passed, And so my point is, when something comes up and you notice an issue, deal with it. Because if you don't, it's not going to go away. Like the movie we saw, right? His warrant didn't go away. It just got hidden for a couple years, and then when he finally caught a momentum, then the problem came. We don't want that, right? We don't want to finally be doing well spiritually. Oh, finally, I've been going through so much discipline, and then all of a sudden, an issue comes up, and it's like 2 weeks into you doing well, and then you got to start all over again, right? But that wouldn't have happened if that was handled beforehand. And so continuing with my story, when I had felt like that, when I had felt like I was put on an island, it offended me, right? Like I got really pissed off, and I went through a really dark time because, and I know somebody's in here is going through that, because it's one of the hardest tests you're going to experience, is when you feel, whether you make a mistake or you're actually suffering for a good reason, you have to go through what Jesus did, and that is God may allow you to feel like you're on an island, and he wants to see when you feel like that, when you feel that abandonment, you have to, God's watching you. That is a critical moment. It's not the time to fall into self-pity. It's the time to, I'll never forget this. Like 6 years ago, I remember Bishop Kim preached a sermon on revival, and he said, when you feel like you're cornered and everything's coming at you once, then God wants you to make a critical choice. And that stuck with me to this day. And every time I feel like pressured and I feel like, instructions coming this way, or like all these things coming at once, then that is God, through my circumstances, telling me, you need to make a choice. Otherwise, it's going to close in. It's like I'm reading Ezekiel right now in the TPT, and it talks about how God had Ezekiel get a stone and draw Jerusalem on the stone, and like literally draw out like a war happening on the stone, the ramps being built. And it was like God's message was, you guys better tear down your altars. You better throw the idols aside, because Babylon's going to come in and you're going to get destroyed, and your children are going to you're going to eat your own children, and your children are going to eat you. Is all these terrible messages, right? And it was just coming, and God kept telling him, the end is coming, the end is near. And it was like day after day, like he just kept telling them. And Ezekiel would do all these signs. He would lay on his side, for 430 days to represent the sin that he was bearing for Israel, for the 430 years of sin that they had. Or he would draw on the tablet, like I said, not an iPad, stone, right? He would draw on the tablet representing, and he would speak to it. You're going to be captured, right? So this is God showing through signs. And Ezekiel's his tongue was literally stuck to the roof of his mouth, it says, and that he couldn't even speak unless God wanted him to speak. And then literally the only words that could come out of his mouth were God's words. He couldn't even speak his own words. And most of the time he was mute, which means he couldn't talk. And the only way that he portrayed God's message was through these acts, right? Through these acts of, like I told you, writing on the tablet or laying on his side, or walking around naked, right? To show how Israel is going to feel after they got captured and they had nothing left, right? And so, it's just, when you have something come your way, you got to take it one at a time. And back to the story. Why do I bring that up? Why? You have to always think about your motive. Why is it that I had a good relationship with Pastor, and then I get disciplined, and God's like, I want you to come to me now, and now I feel completely separated and off, 1,000 miles on another island. And now I feel like God's watching me. What's the choice I'm going to make during this time? Right? God's watching your mouth too, because when those kind of tests happen, that the enemy is going to attack you, and you're going to get a lot of attacks in your mind, and you're going to want to say certain things. And you might want to tell somebody off. Okay, I'm telling you guys, this is real. But I've learned that there can be thoughts that come into your mind, but as long as you don't allow your emotions to overtake you, you're going to win at the end of the day, right? You might lose a few battles, but you're going to win the war. You might have a bad couple of days and just thoughts overwhelming you, but as long as you don't react on it and you just keep pressing forward in your daily prayer and reading and what you're supposed to take care of, that over time you're going to win that battle. You're going to win that war. And so the reason that I got upset is because there was an issue in my heart, right? I was so used to not trusting in God because I was able to lean on my authority so heavily. You see what I'm talking about? Now, for new people, this is what you need to do until you can grow spiritually mature and you can walk on your own. It's like a child, right? But a lot of us in here are past that, and we're still clinging on to the old milk when we need to go into the future, right? We need to let go and just start walking. We might be a little wobbly, we might fall down like Rachel. She just and then she just gets back up, it's like 100 times a day, but she just keeps doing it. And what this revealed is the core of my message is the reason that I was upset when I felt like I was off to the side was because I was basing my approval off of my image about what people would think about me, right? So my approval was not in what God thought about me. And this is so cliche, but it's cliche for a reason. It's because it is such a deep revelation that it's like Jesus dying, right? Like it's like, oh, okay, we get it, right? People think like this all the time, but it's pronounced all throughout the ages because, right? And people think like, oh, it's cliche. Well, it's that way for a reason because it means something, right? It means something, and it can't just sit up here. It has to sink, like Pastor says, into your heart. And that could take years. I realize that also being reborn is not an easy thing. It is a very difficult thing, right? That could take years. You could have a relationship and then finally get reborn, like myself, right? And then those things that seem very surface level and cliche, they start hitting you and you're like, oh my gosh, this really is a huge, deep revelation. Like it's just so heavy. It hits you in a different way. Whereas before you would just read it and you're like, yes, I've read this many times, and I'm asking God, like, I need that deeper revelation. And then when you go through these experiences and you realize you're like, wow, I've never really had my identity in God. I thought I did because I came to church. I thought I did because I read and prayed. I thought I did because I ran all my questions by pastor and I had a close relationship with them. But that doesn't define my relationship with God. What defines your relationship with God is your trust in God. And you'll know you're trusting God when you're going through a tough season and you might even be being disciplined, and now that connection with your authorities is severed and you're out on an island by yourself and God's watching you. Are you going to trust in me now? What are you going to do now that there's seemingly no help by your side? Are you going to give in? Are you going to go back to your old ways? Are you going to go back to Egypt? Or are you going to go back to your old home because we're just so in pain that I'd rather just go back to my old ways? That's like what it was in Ezekiel's time too. God's like, if you stay in Jerusalem when Babylon comes, you're going to die by the famine. If you try to run away, you're going to die on the outskirts by the sword. And if I do let you escape to Egypt, I will bring you back and then kill you. So God's like, any way that you don't submit, it's going to end up bad for you. And so when I'm reading this, I'm like, wow, it's like I was telling you, if everything's coming at you at once, you got to think, I better make a right decision because God's telling me there's literally no way out. Any way that I go, it's going to turn out bad. I try to go back home to my old ways, it's going to end up bad. I try to think that I'm going to overcome the situation by myself, it's going to turn out bad. I try to go escape to another vice or another idol or drinking or drugs or porn or anything else, and it's going to turn out bad. And then we're going to stuff that in the closet, and all that's going to build up. And Babylon's just coming in closer and closer, and all of a sudden it all gets revealed at once, and now we got to go through a lot of suffering and when that didn't need to happen at first. And so, back to the approval, right? You have to know your relationship directly with God. Pastors are here to support us and grow us. But when you go to God's throne, God's going to ask you directly, right? Those questions, right? Did you pray? Did you read it? Pastor did his job, right? In Ezekiel, if somebody is sinning and you give them my warning and they don't turn from their ways and they die, you saved your life. But if someone's sinning and I tell you to go warn them and you don't warn them and they die, the blood's on your hands, Ezekiel, right? So that's the fear that pastors live in, that I live in. I have to report to God about how his people are doing, right? And I have to warn them and I have to tell them, this is the way you need to go. This is the way you need to obey God. This is how you keep the commandments, right? And if I do that and you choose to go your own way, that's on you then, right? We as authorities can come and help you back up, right? We can pick you back up and we can constantly do it and help you and constantly instruct you, even if it's going downhill. But that choice rests with you because we are not responsible for your relationship with God, right? Pastor's not responsible for my relationship with God. He can assist me because of how God loved him, he loves me, and that's how he shows his gratitude. But at the end of the day, it's not his responsibility, right? And we have to understand this because when we go to heaven, God's going to ask us directly, how's my relationship with you, right? It doesn't say in the Bible when they went to heaven, oh, I don't know you because of Pastor Steve or because of APC or because of somebody else. God says, I don't know you directly to me, to somebody else, right? Your relationship with God, that's it. That's what matters in this life. It doesn't, right? All the material things, great, it's fun, but at the same time, it's literally not gonna do anything for you when you make it home. That's all going to disappear, and you're going to be on a face-to-face conversation with God. And he's going to ask you, how's your relationship with me? Right? Yes, and you could say the excuses, well, pastors didn't help me, or you can make up all these excuses, but God's going to want to know what's your relationship with him, right? And there's it always amazed me. It always amazed me how when we watched that video of hell, that there's the kids that are 8 years old, 8, and God's telling them that they're responsible for their decisions, right? So how much more us adults, right? So we have to understand that that as we're being fed, and we're not sure how to eat yet. But once we get to a point where we can start eating, we have to take that role, because if not, then we're trampling on grace. And this is, it's funny because we talk about so much the milk and the meat all the time, but it's serious. Like, we have to understand that this isn't you got to grow up. This is mandatory. It's not an option, because when you get home, God's going to ask you, why didn't you take on your responsibility? Why didn't you finish your calling, right? And Pastor Kim says, those who reject the calling of God, they might not make it home, So we have to think about our relationship. And I'm glad that God severed my relationship with pastors for a season because it showed me my true relationship with God, and it was lacking. And I realized that a lot of things that we do, that I did, is a lot of our questions that we ask are just manipulation. We might be deceived to it at a time, and there may be times we do it intentionally, but when you come out of a season where God's revealing a lot of things in your heart, you're really going to understand the wickedness of your natural human tendencies, how you just naturally do things, right? How you can catch yourself and be like, why do I even need to ask that question if I know why I'm asking it? It's because I want a certain outcome and I'm trying to manipulate the situation. God gives you that discernment, right? And you have to act on that. And so let me read Galatians 1. This is Paul speaking to the church of Galatia. Do you think I care about the approval of men or about the approval of God? Do you think I am on a mission to please people? If I am still spinning my wheels trying to please men, then there is no way I can be a servant of the Anointed One, the liberating King. The other version just say, there's no way I can be a true servant of God if I'm always trying to please people. And one of the most polarizing things that Pastor ever told me that really helped me was that he told me directly there was a heated conversation, and he held fine, but it was me that got heated. And he told me to my face, he said, "You don't work for me. You work for God." And that hit me because we have to be careful, right? We have to be careful because if we're trying to push in a direction where all we want is the approval of our authorities, then we're going to be in trouble when a true test comes because our relationship with God is lacking. And I'm telling you from my own experience, right? And most people are going to be afraid to talk about this, but I'm not, because I know it's going to help somebody. This is what happened to me. It happened to me where I felt like I was all good because I had somebody making decisions and helping me when I was just too scared to make the decision myself. And when God severed that relationship, God's showing me that I don't have a relationship with Him. And this can apply to a lot of people, right? If we're refusing to grow up, it shows a lack of trust in God. And if you have a lack of trust in God, that shows your lack of relationship with God. Because when you have a relationship with somebody, that means you trust them, right? If your relationship isn't tight with God, you don't trust God, right? And we could say it all day long, but if we're getting offended when a relationship gets severed, like in my case, then that is a clear indication that something's off, right? And I'm telling you from my experience so that it's real. So it's real. So you guys can understand that this stuff happens, and I know people think about it. And so we have to be careful. You have to know that line, right? And pastors also told me, and I need you guys to take this in context, but it's for people that know better and you need to take care of your own business and you have to grow up. Pastor told me, and it kind of stirred me up, but he told me, he basically told me he's like, I don't owe you anything. He said, I don't owe you anything. And so the way that hit me is because if I start jogging in my mind how many things I've done for God, that just shows your lack of relationship with God. Because if you had a relationship with somebody, that relationship is not built on merit. It's not built on things you do. Your relationship with your wife, there's so many issues that occur. You're not staying to it out of, in a sense, and if you think about it, in a sense, you're not staying in the relationship for the benefit of it. You're staying in it because there's just a oneness there. I don't know if that makes sense to you guys, but it's like you're staying there because there's a mutual love and respect that's deeper than your emotions and your arguments. And you understand that even if all these other things are happening or below you, that your relationship is above all those things. And so even when there is no benefit in the relationship per se, you guys rise above that as a couple because there's a deeper bond, more than material things, more than your emotions, more than an argument, right? There's a bond. And that's why I think in Proverbs, when he talks about one of the things that is very a mystery to me is the way that a bride falls in love with the bridegroom, because there's a glue that holds it together, and we know what that is, but the world can't explain that. Why is the divorce rate so high? Is because that glue is God, but people don't understand that. We understand that, and that's the mystery. There's somehow a bond between two, even when all hell breaks loose, that just can't be broken if God's in the middle of that. And I think that's what's really special, I don't even know why I went on that tangent, but I feel like I'm just rambling. What was I talking about? Do you remember? Before the marriage thing? Oh, yeah. So pastor's like, yeah. Luckily it's past now and I can laugh about it, right? I want to clear the elephants in the room because there's people out there that are offended, and there's people out there that are having similar thoughts that I had. And they're scared to admit it. And you're scared to take initiative on what to do. And you're scared to grow up because you really don't trust God. You think you do, but all hell is breaking loose in your life. And your relationship with your authorities are getting severed. And God's watching you now. What's your house built on? Right? And mine was built on a combination of like cement and sand. And I got left standing with like a foot on one cement. Like all the other sand fell, and I'm like on one piece, like the little glacier in the middle of Antarctica, right? So that's God saving me there to help me realize that I need to have that rock solid ice foundation just all the way across all the glaciers that's just solid. You can't break through it, right? Cement, stone. And so when he's saying, I don't owe you, it's just triggering all this in me. And because I'm thinking like everything that I've done, I just wanted to, approval for it. This is like my deep inside speaking. It's like I could just feel it. It's obviously not speaking to me, but I'm just saying like, you know what I mean? It's like telling me like, man, I just wanted approval, and now I'm by the one person I want approval from I feel rejected. And it's so easy to fall in self-pity in that moment, but God has to let that happen, because if it doesn't, you're going to be handicapped for the rest of your life spiritually. You'll never grow close with God. And so, please, guys, don't think like you have to understand context, right? Like this is part of our natural walk. We come to the church. We have loving authorities that help us and give us confidence and direct us to God. But that at a certain time, when that time comes, you'll know. You will know, trust me. You don't have to ask. You'll just know that it's your time to grow up. And when it's your time, you got to seize that opportunity and you got to let go. Because if you don't, then God is going to create a situation where, in my case, it was just a chisel right down the middle of the bond that I didn't want to let go of because of my lack of trust in God. And so that relationship got severed, and it shattered, and it shattered me inside because I was so refusing to start my own walk that it actually hindered me, because I wasn't willing to trust God now, right? Is this making sense? And I hope that if there's people online listening too, you guys understand, because this is a really heavy topic that I know everyone experiences. And so that was one thing. He said that I don't owe him, and that stirred me up. And then as the months went by, I would realize that God's showing me that I'm looking for validation and approval from the wrong person. It's not that they're bad people. It's the fact that they don't care about that. They're there to point us to God. They don't want it. It's like in the Bible when Peter and them, I think, where they do like a miracle and then they're like trying to bow down to them. And guys, like, they're like, whoa, like, we're not God. We're the same as you guys. That's how they think. They don't want that praise. They want to push you to God because that's the only way you're going to make it to heaven is if you have a relationship with God, not your relationship through your pastors. That's how you get started, but you got to get up on your feet, right? And so that showed me. And then another one was, what was it? So he said that I don't work for him. He said that, I'm just telling you guys, like, it's real, And he said that, the one that I just said, that I don't, he doesn't owe me, right? And so all the things that I had grown to put my trust in God through my authorities when God is telling me to go to him now, God severed that, and now all that's coming out of my heart. A lot of bad thoughts, trust me. And now I'm left with the decision of how am I going to handle this? And God's showing me, like, this is what it's like to really trust in God and to have a relationship with him. It's when you feel like you want to say something, you feel like you want to give up. That is that critical moment. You have to pass that test. It's so important. Because if you cross that line, I don't want to take that chance, I don't want to take the chance where it's done like Moses. Like I'm like Pastor in the way where I don't want to take the chance where if I don't do something, let's see how my life turns out. I'm just going with the thought that if I mess up and it could be over for me, like my calling could be done, I could be replaced. That scares me, and it's like I don't want to make the same mistake as like Moses, where he like put so much work in and like such a deep relationship with God, and just in the moment where it was so critical, and like he just felt like it was the world against him. Everybody's gonna feel like that. Not that thought is right or not, but you might feel that, and God still wants to know, what are you gonna choose? That's where the test needs to be passed. That's the important part. And can't think of the last one. It's really important too. But let's move to the next verse. Matthew 6. And go all the way to the top, please. Okay, so the reason I brought this verse up is because let's say you're in a situation like me where God's revealing things in your heart and that you have all your priorities twisted and you realize, oh my gosh, my relationship with God is not good. Just because we come in here and we sit down and we're here for X amount of years, it literally means nothing to God. Your effort in how you're putting in your effort to maintain your relationship with God, that's what matters. At the end of the day, that's literally the only thing that matters is between you and him. And if that's not handled, then tests are going to come to show you that that's not handled, and then you're going to have to fix it. And it's not going to be a fun test. It's going to be a test that hits the core of your being. And what's crazy is that when I experienced this, a lot of what I thought was my personality, it just started going away. I realized that a lot of the things that I feel like God's bringing out my true personality that he originally created within me. And he had to break the mold that the devil made over me. right? It's like a big clay mold over me that I thought was me. And then God shattered that. And now my true self is coming out. And the things that I thought I used to like, that I thought I used to, thought was my personality, I realized like I don't like that anymore. Just like very strange things where it's like I felt like a lot of stuff before has to be like really perfect, like it's got to look clean, and I still have a part of that because you got to have detail orientation, right? But I know I go to school and I see like these people obsessing over like the littlest thing, and I'm thinking like, dude, you're never going to release music if you do this, And I'm thinking like, dang, maybe that's how I look, And I'm like, I got to, and then like after I come out of school, I feel like God just like really gave me like more of like a relaxed vibe, whereas before I was like so uptight. And like whereas before I want everything to look so clean and perfect, now I want a little bit of imperfection because it's natural. It's just like weird things I would have never thought of by myself. And it's like God's bringing that out. And then like, I'm even thinking of like, like you guys know me, I like the new thing. I like the best, most nicest, perfect, sleek car, right? Like all these, you guys kind of know my personality, or at least my old personality. And then like, I'm walking through, like I did a lot of walking while I was at school. I'm done, by the way. I graduated on Friday. Praise God. Thank you, God. Yeah, it was fun. All right, guys. See you later. Just kidding. Okay. But just like the polar opposite stuff is coming out of me, where I'm like, I don't think I wanted like a nice, perfect car. I think I want like an old school car, And I'm thinking like, why am I thinking that? Like that's not my personality. And I'm thinking like, maybe that's God bringing out His style in me instead of what I tried to force and mold myself. And Pastor always used to tell me that you got to pray for the style that God wants you to have, not the style that you want. And by style, that can mean lifestyle. It can mean clothes. It can mean anything. It can mean your nature as a person, your vibe, your personality, your trait, right? What if what we think is us is not us? And newsflash, it's not you. You have to go through breaking to realize that there's something else inside of you that's you, not the outside stuff that the world has molded you. And you guys got to be careful about culture, world culture, because I realized that has framed my thinking since I was a youth. And so, exactly, Illuminati. That was a good one. That was a really good one. It's making me laugh still. Okay. But, yeah, world culture, it seems so innocent, but it will literally steer you in the wrong direction because that is the plan of the devil, right? Be careful what you watch. Be careful what you listen to. That is so important. I can't tell you how many, I fell into the same trap too, but I can't tell you how many times I'm telling the guys, at least previously, they're better now, but stop listening to that. Stop listening to that. Because if you think about it, like Pastor said, it's a continuous thing. A movie you might watch once, but the song is like, what if you really like a song? You listen to it 3-4 times a day for a month. That's 120 times. 100, imagine, right, how many times did it take to make a habit? Like 20 days, right? So if you're listening to something 120 times, or you're scrolling on your phone watching somebody else's life 120,000 times, because it's so easy. What do they say? Like you can go through thousands of posts in like a couple hours or something ridiculous like that. I've by choice like started to really cut stuff off because I don't like how it makes me feel. Like let's just set aside the spiritual stuff for a second. I don't like how it makes me feel as a person. It just like, there's just something that like, there's just something that like it feels like you feel like gross or something. I can't explain it. I don't know if you guys feel the same, but like let's say I'm like I pick up my phone and I go shopping, right? I'm like shopping on my phone for like 3 hours. You put the phone down and then like, and I watch a movie. I watch like a movie that's okay for me to watch for like, let's say 2-3 hours, and I feel fine after. But like for some things, like if I'm looking at like if there's like a social media thing or even like a post that comes up on like YouTube and I'm like, oh, why is this here? Like it just like it you could feel it come on you. Like you could just feel it. It's just this weird feeling and you just feel like there's just like this weight on your face or something. Does anybody else feel that or just me? Like you could feel it in your eyes or something. And I'm like, I just don't like how it makes me feel. And I'm like, I don't even want to look at it. And then like hearing people talk at school and the stupid things they talk about, and I'm thinking like, oh my gosh, was I literally like this? Because if I am, like, I'm really hating myself right now. I don't want to be I don't want to be engraved in that culture. I'm liking the culture that God's bringing out of me, not the culture that I'm conforming to. Jesus is the real culture that's supposed to come out of us and or influence other people. We shouldn't be influenced by someone else and it comes into us. It should be vice versa. The culture is living in us as God, and that's supposed to come out and influence other people. Like the social medias and the movies and the music influences you and goes inside you. And then because that seed is inside of you, now what you think is your personality, it's really just seeds being hatched and coming out of you, and that's your personality. But it's not. And that needs to be melted away, crushed away. And then the real you starts coming out. And it's the nature of God, which has many facets, right? God has so many great personalities. Right? Just look around. That's just a couple, right? Will, Mufang, Stephen, right? All the people. Rosie. All the people have different personalities, and this is from God, right? And it's what makes the church special, right? But if we're so consumed with what we think we want to be, then we'll never see what we're really going to be, which is better than what we think we want to be. And so to wrap this all the way back to the beginning, I've just been like on a rambling preaching mode for the past few weeks, but I kind of like it because I don't have to look at the screen so much. I'm like anti-screen after seeing people on social media. So you come to church and you have an authority here that is helping you grow, but the end goal is that they're holding your hand to pick you up so you can start walking and then walking by yourself. And then they can look off to the side and be like, they can be proud, right? They can be proud of you. But if they're holding your hand like for eternity, then if you think of God's kingdom like an actual business, and when I say profit, I mean people. But if we have so many people weighing down when they're supposed to be grown up, then you're going to slow revenue for the kingdom. You're going to slow the profit. You're going to slow the amount of people that are saved. You're going to be more of a liability to the kingdom than an asset, right? When you take accounting, for you guys going into college, you're an asset or a liability. I mean, you guys are already past that, right? You guys have already taken stats. Going to Berkeley, right? Praise God. So there's an asset and a liability. You have to ask yourself, because you're either one or the other. It's not in between. If you're here and you're new and you're being grown, you're an asset because you're untapped potential. You're like an untapped stock that hasn't gone public yet, and we have to nurture you in order to you to sprout. But if you're somebody that knows better, you're a liability, right? You are costing God more than what He can be doing through you, right? It's like a stock that had so much potential, and then everybody invested all the time, and then it just fell flat. And now everybody that could have profited off that, all the people that could have been saved, it's just wasted now, right? And like, that's reality. We can't think it's all like fun and games all the time. Like, either you're helping the kingdom or you're weighing it down, you know? And like I said, new people, you're helping the kingdom. But those who know better, you got to ask yourself, are you weighing the kingdom down by refusing to grow up because of your lack of trust in God, because of your lack in identity in God? Because you have a lack of identity and a lack of trust, you look for approval in other things, like your authority, that you should be growing up and walking by yourself now, like in my case. And so God has to create a situation where that's severed, and then he's going to show you your identity was never in me. Your identity was in the approval of how others think about you. Your identity is what you will be one day instead of what you already are inside. Why are you trying to conform when people should be conforming to you? Right? Jesus. And so, really, this all stems from a lack of relationship. You have a lack of relationship. You look for approval in other things. You look for comfort in other things like idols. You start identifying yourself with other things, and it starts changing you. But it needs to be the complete opposite, right? And so, if you feel like you're in that season, your job is to make the right choices. And I'm going to give you guys another secret tip. When, like in my case, my relationship was severed, right? And I was so used to saying, oh, I did this, oh, I did that, because I wanted approval, right? And now, if I do something, because that relationship is severed, now nobody sees it. Only God sees it. Because even at that time, I was upset. I don't want to talk to pastor at that time, okay? Like, to be real. And so I'm not going to share things that are happening. And so I'm thinking like, okay, well, if I do something, then I just got to do it, And I feel like I'm actually grateful because God like trained me to do stuff just for him, period. Right? Like, don't do it because, your pastor can come up and say, good job. That's not his job. His job is to help you go to God. He's not here to nurture and say, oh, good job. Like if we're growing and you're new, that's different. But this is really important. This is so important because if we don't understand this concept, then we're going to be seeking approval from people for the rest of our life. And when we feel like our authority or another person treats us in a different way, then we're going to be upset and we're going to be easily offended because we don't know our identity in God. We don't know that I'm just going to do my work. Why do I don't need, that's my revelation that I've come to. If I do something for God, why do I need to tell anybody, right? If pastor tells me, go do this, I'm just going to do it. I don't need to go after and be like, hey, look what a great job I did. Like, he wants the job done. Your bosses want the job done. That's it. And when you do that, it's as if you're working for the Lord, like in Colossians, right? That's why I brought this up, because if you're in that season, you just got to do right. You have to do right, and you got to keep your mouth shut. Don't say anything dumb, and just learn what God is trying to teach you. Don't resist it, because I resisted a little bit, and it became harder, and the squeeze was harder. But once you let God do the work in you, you're going to be so happy because God's teaching you how to truly have a relationship with Him and work for Him, And I'm glad that Pastor told me that because that needed to sink into me because it wasn't there. I was working for other people, for approval of other people. And because of that, my relationship with God was not there. And so when you continue to do these things behind closed doors and you're doing right, nobody needs to know. Just stop feeling like you got to go tell people like, oh, I'm doing right. Oh, look what I did. Hey, I got this, I got that. Like, I mean, that's great, but like, honestly, nobody cares, okay? To be straight up, like, everybody got their own problems. Everybody got their own life. And they might look at it for a moment, but come tomorrow, they got to take care of the day that's in front of them. And so keep the relationship between you and God. And when God severs your relationship with your authorities, you have to know respect also, right? You can't have a bad attitude. That God has taught me now that while I have my own relationship with God, they're still my authorities and I have to respect them. And now I have a greater respect for them because they helped me reveal those things that I needed to see in order to come closer to God. And so when you do this and you understand that, okay, even if I'm behind closed doors, even if I'm on the sidelines, okay, I made a mistake, you just work hard and God will notice you. You don't need to tell everybody else. You don't need to show everybody else. And when you do that, this law that God created in the universe will apply to you. Examine your motives, right? And that's another thing. Why are you asking a question? Because you want an outcome. If we want to go back to my old personality, let's say I want to go buy a pair of $1,000 shoes when it's outside of my season. If I did not have pastors in my life and I didn't have the money, I would very easily be like, I just can't afford it. Unless you're people out there that put it on the credit card, which please don't do that. But if you can't afford it, then you're just like, okay, I can't do it. But because we have someone in our life where we feel like, oh, because I want to get my manipulation through, I want to weave my way through, hopefully I can get my own outcome, then we'll go to pastor and say, hey, pastor, what do you think about me buying like $1,000 pair of shoes? And you could say whatever you want to manipulate the situation. Oh, I just got a new job and, I think I can afford it, when you're probably just lying. And so now that question that you would have never even acted upon because you couldn't afford it, now you're looking for a loophole through your authority because you actually don't trust God. And so you want to go to someone that you think has all the answers right because you don't have your own relationship with God. And so you're going to go and ask out of wrong motive. And the scary part is they might say okay. And that's the thing I also learned. And then it's going to fall all the way on your face, like really hard. That is the lesson you don't want to learn. Trust me. So when you go through something hard, and here's another thing I want to tell you guys. All throughout my life, pretty much in everything that I've done, I've been the best at it. And I'm not trying to boast. I'm telling you as an example, okay? If I was playing video games, if I was playing sports, anything I did with my friends, I was always better than everybody else. And now God takes me here and thrives me in the kingdom and then completely shuts me down and puts me to the sideline. Okay? Think about that. Think about that, how that might have felt for me, right? And you guys might feel the same way. You might have a certain personality where you've been doing things on this side for your whole life, and you're used to it. And then God comes and turns your world upside down, and now you're over here in a place that you never thought you'd be. And now you're like, oh, shoot, like, this is really hard, But when you're in that season, like I said, put your head down and just accept your mistake and move forward with the right attitude and just do right. Just do right and don't let anybody see. Just do right. Let it be between you and God purposefully. I made that purposely for me. I would say I'm literally not going to tell anybody. And it wasn't out of spite to pastor. It was just the fact that like I wanted to train myself. When I do something for God, nobody else has to know. And I would train myself that way, and I wouldn't say anything. And every single time, God brings it out. Every single time without knowing, God will bring it to the light, because it's this law that God has applied to the universe that says if you do something in secret, I will make it be known publicly. If you want to exalt yourself, then you are going to be put in a secret place where you feel like you're on an island. And so that's this verse here. Examine your motives to make sure you're not showing off when you do your good deeds only to be admired by others. Otherwise, you will lose the reward of your heavenly Father. So when you give to the poor, don't announce it and make a show of it just to be seen by people, like the hypocrites in the streets and in the marketplace. They've already received their reward. But when you demonstrate generosity, this is just an example. Jesus gives like 10 examples: prayer, fasting, giving to the poor, but this can apply to anything. So let's just say when you do anything for God's kingdom, do it with pure motives and without drawing attention to yourself. Work secretly for God, who sees all you do, and he will reward you openly. So, to wrap all this up, if you're in a situation where God's revealing that you have a lack of trust in him and your relationship with him is all messed up and you've been seeking approval from the wrong things and you've been manipulating words to your pastors because you want certain outcomes, because you know that your own prayers don't work, because you don't have your own trust in God. And so because you feel empty inside, now you want to go and do things and let everybody know about it because that's the only fulfillment that you can have, because you're deep inside, your relationship with God's lacking. Okay, given all that, I know that's a lot. Given all that, God's going to come to break you. And when he does, and you should actually pray for it, because you'll be very happy with the results. And I'm over time, but I have to tell this story because it has stuck with me through the ages. When I was in high school, I made a stupid choice, okay? And I got in trouble with the law. And it was very serious. And I'm not joking. And I was facing at least 6 years in prison. And the case got cleared. And we went to the attorney's office in Sacramento. And he was like, and I realized this is like salvation now. He sat me down, and I had always wanted to play in the NFL, right? Like that was my thing since I was a kid. And because of that, through that, those dumb choices, and like I went to jail for a night, what to do. But you don't want to go. It sucks, okay? It's really terrible. Even for a day, I don't ever want to go back. But through all that, I got discouraged, even though it was my own choice and my mistake. And luckily, the case got cleared. That was God, because they could have hammered me. And when I went to the attorney's office, he was like, "Oh, what are you going to do now that," he basically said that, "now that you're free?" And I would have been so discouraged and weighed down, and, I had like people, I'd be going places that, I would go work out at the gym, and people would know that the thing that I had done, the mistake I made, and they would like openly start cussing at me and like ridicule me in public at the gym while I'm working out. Like I couldn't even go play. It was just horrible, right? And so I brought that up because I was discouraged, and I was like, well, I don't really care what I do now. I don't need to play in the NFL. I can do, at the time I wanted, to be a firefighter or something, which isn't a bad job, but I let the other stuff go that I had a passion for because of my discouragement. And I told this to the attorney, and I don't know if you guys know like big attorneys, but they're like the epitome of a CEO, but like 5 times more. They walk around with just like this authority. I can't explain it. It's you ever been around like a big CEO? Or okay, you know like Bishop Kim, you know like when he walks in the room, he just has that like that nature. It's just like there's just like you feel the authority on him. You know what I'm talking about? Come on. Okay, you can feel it. You're like, oh, okay, I got to show respect, you know? That's like how a CEO is of a company. It feels the same. But a lawyer who's like a big shot, it's like that, but like more. I can't explain it. It's very off-putting, to be honest. And he looks at me in the face and he's like, "You're going to be a firefighter?" He's like, "What the F are you thinking, dude?" And he literally starts like rebuking me in front of my mom. And like cussing at me. He's like, "You're going to go through all this and you're going to," and he was like dead serious in my face too. He's like, "You're going to go through all this and you're going to get free from this case and you're going to go be an effing firefighter. That's what you're going to do." He's like, "You were telling me that you want to go do big things and play football and now you're just going to give up on life because you just went through something hard." And I don't know if you guys know my old personality, but I mean, I was ready to fight the dude. And I held it in, and we went to the car, and I told my mom, like, "Who the F does this guy think he is? Telling me that. Like, he's not my parent. Who does he think he is telling me that I can run my life like this?" And I was, like, really pissed off. And like I think a month or so, no, it was probably more than that. A lot of time went by, maybe 6 months to a year, and I vividly just remember that those words spoke in my head, and I was thinking like, what am I doing? You know, like I can't let this mistake weigh me down. I got to get back up, and I just got to, you know, I can't let my passion for life just like be completely deflated because I fell. You know, I gotta fully get back up. I can't be living in this haze for the rest of my life, you know. And I've come to greatly appreciate that guy told me that, because it's like it got blocked by my anger, but it sunk in and it hit my core. And that's like God, like your authority's coming to you. And he might have said those things which upset me at the time when Pastor told me those things, but it was what I needed to hear, and it actually set me free, you know? And because of that, I can have my walk with God now and even have a greater respect and relationship than I tried to force before with the pastors. And it's nothing to boast about. It just naturally happens. Because when you get right with God, everything else falls into place. Like it says, to seek the kingdom first and everything else will fall into place, right? So don't feel like you need to ever explain, or don't feel like you ever need to show off to somebody about things that you've done. God has already seen it. And it's actually better that you just keep it to yourself, because then God's going to reward it in public. And it'll be a bigger reward than any human being can give you on this planet. Right? And so the last thought I want to leave you with is, Deacon Jr., come up here real quick. I need a prop. So if I have my own walk with God, and I'm not new, but I'm somebody that has grown up, and God wants me to start my own walk with God, right? Let's say I'm a kid and I'm leaning on like my authority or someone that's been helping me grow, right? But if I stay like this for the rest of my life, I can't ever walk, right? I'm leaning. And so if they're walking, walk that way, right? Like I'm leaning, right? So if I'm always leaning, I can never be walking. And that thought, I went on a walk today. Oh yeah, I went on a walk. Thank you, that's it. But I went on a walk today, and I didn't know what I was going to preach about. And literally the random thought came into my head. If we're always leaning, we're never walking. And so you got to think about that. Really think about what that means. If I'm at a point where I can finally flap my wings, but I'm still holding on to the hands that have helped me grow, and I'm scared to let go, if I'm constantly leaning on other people to do my bidding with God when I have the ability to do it myself, I'll never have my own relationship with God. And when we get to heaven, God wants to know, what's your relationship with him? So just please ponder on that, and that's it.